Okay, Parshat Toldot can be broken up into a play of 3 acts, which is what many of the Parshiot that we're reading now, many of them are broken up into 3-act plays. It's fascinating from a literary point of view, even though we don't normally treat the Torah in that way. But the next several Parshiot are 3-act plays, each Parsha. What are the 3 acts in Parshas Toldos? The birth and childhood of Esav and Yaakov. That's what we would call the first act. The second act is the life of Yitzchak and Rivka in Gerar, the land of the Philistines, and all of the trials and tribulations that Yitzchak has to undergo. So we see nothing of Yaakov and Esav in the Act 2. They're completely absent from Act 2, although we know it's after they're born. Act 3 is that fateful event of Yitzchak dispensing the blessing to the person that he thinks is Esav, but is really Yaakov. So those are the 3 acts. Okay? Now, you would think that Act 2 is unrelated entirely from the lives, detached completely from the lives of Yaakov and Esav, because they're not even mentioned in the story. Really, the story in Act 2 is that Yitzchak and Rivka traveled to Gerar because of the famine, and the same thing that happened to Avram and Sarah when they went down to Egypt happened to Yitzchak and Rivka, that Yitzchak has to tell them it's my sister because he's worried they're going to kill him, right? And then Avimelech, who's the king of the Philistines, discovers that it's really his wife, and he says, why did you do this, So Yitzchak says, because I thought you were going to kill me. And then they let Yitzchak live in the Philistine area, which is now presumably the Gaza Strip. It was a little bit safer back then for Jews. Not much safer, but a little bit safer, right? And Yitzchak digs these wells, and the Philistines fill in the wells until finally there's a peace treaty between Yitzchak and Avimelech, and Yitzchak is able to finally dig a well that remains open and is a source of much blessing, Be'er Sheva. Okay? So that's the story. That's the story. Now, the Abarbanel asks a very interesting question. He says, where were Yaakov and Esav during this whole story? Why are they're absent from the story? Obviously, a lot of times episodes happen to us in our lives when we have children, but our children are not central characters in the play. So that doesn't mean that they're not there with us. They're just, something happens at work. So you don't have to record what happened to your kids. They were in school. But where were Yaakov and Esav? So the Abarbanel addresses this issue in source number 2. He says, V'hinei Yitzchak b'mitzvat Hashem yashav b'gerar, v'anshei hamakom sha'alu al devar ishto. He says Yitzchak was commanded by Hashem to live in Gerar. And the people, the Philistines of the time, asked him about his wife, Ki kavar hayu milomadim mima shekara la'Avraham shelo lingoa bi'isha nochrit eshet ish. They already knew that it's not proper to engage with a married woman. They knew that story from Avraham. V'lachein sha'alu imhi ishto. And therefore they asked, is this your wife? V'zeh shekatuv li ishto v'lo sha'aluhu al habanim. But one thing they didn't ask him was about, why would they ask, is that Rivka your wife, if they see them traveling with 2 little pitzalach? I mean, when was the last time you saw a couple traveling with the 2 babies, twins in a stroller, and you assumed that this was the guy's sister? Right? Why did they even bother asking? Wouldn't you naturally make that assumption? So he says, Ki ulai b'nei isha acheret hen. So the Abarbanel says, no, it could be that they figured, Rivka was very beautiful, so maybe it was wishful thinking, but they thought, maybe it's from another wife, maybe it's from your past wife. So therefore, tell us, what's the story with Rivka? Obviously, the question indicates that they were interested in Rivka, but that's the story. In other words, the fact is, the question is a relevant question. One of the things we have to bear in mind is that when we read this story, therefore, we have to remember that Yaakov and Esav are witness to everything that happens to Yitzchak and to Rivka during their sojourn in Gerar. And this is the point that I really want to make. And it really hit home to me a couple of years ago when I was learning this parsha, and Fidel Castro died. Why is that? Anyone here from Cuba? No, you're from Mexico. Anyone here from Cuba? No? Mexican? Okay. Because Cuba had a very vibrant Jewish community in the 50s, before Castro came to power. Okay, and so when Castro died, it was around this time, a couple years ago, and in order to understand the story of Fidel Castro, you have to also understand the story of Angel Castro, who was Fidel Castro's father. Because, and listen to this story, to understand the Castro brothers, in other words, Fidel and his brother, it is necessary to understand their father Angel Castro. The desperate hunger for power and status of the Castro brothers is a direct inheritance from Angel and his life. Their communism is just a justification for having total control. The anti-Americanism stemmed from the treatment as inferiors of the father and sons by Americans in Cuba. Angel prospered by providing services for the United Fruit Company, which was an American company. He became a labor contractor supplying cane cutters for the annual cane harvest. The workers Angel supplied were Haitians and Jamaicans of African descent. Angel Castro was quite useful for the United Fruit Company, but he, being a Cuban and an illiterate one at that, was not treated with respect. This is a very insightful little biography, sort of a little snippet of a biography of Fidel Castro. Now, what is going on in Fidel's mind when he sees what's going on?
Anger towards the Americans?
Anger towards the Americans, because they see their father being treated with such disrespect. Yeah, as you can imagine. So he says, if I ever get my druthers and I'm able to rise to power, I'm going to stick it to the Americans, right? Now, I want you to imagine your Yaakov or your Esav growing up in Gerar, watching the way that the Philistines treat your father. Now, is there a particular reason that Hashem told Yitzchak and Rivka to live in Gerar? It's a very interesting sociological phenomenon. It's like telling the Jews to go live with the Italians in Brooklyn. Why? Because the Italians were an immigrant class, and the Jews were an immigrant class. So maybe, even though we're not from the same ethnic background, we'll have a little bit of compassion upon each other because we're all greeners, right? Instead of living with the wasps, in somewhere in the upstate New York, we'll live with the other greeners, the Italians and the Irish, in the earlier part of the 20th century, right? The idea here was the Philistines were also not indigenous to the land of Israel, which is ironic because the Palestinians, they say we're indigenous, and see, we're called Palestinians. Who were the indigenous people to the land of Canaan? The Hittites, the Canaanites, right? The Philistines came from the north and the west. They came from areas like Turkey, and they migrated down. Historically, we know this from history. They migrated down into the Fertile Crescent and down into the land of Canaan. They settled in this land, this strip, the Gaza Strip, and they made a little sort of a neighborhood for themselves. And Hashem told Yitzchak and Rivka to go live there in the hopes that, maybe they'll be more hospitable to you because you're all a bunch of immigrants. And maybe that'll be a good lesson in hospitality. Well, unfortunately, what history shows us is that just because you're immigrants and we're immigrants doesn't mean that we're always going to get along, right? And we see this all the time. Whether it's the Italians and the Jews, or whether, even today, whether it's the Asians and the Muslims in Toronto, just because we're all immigrants doesn't mean we're always going to get along. And so what happened is that the Philistines became very jealous of Yitzchak's success in agriculture. He grows a farm which he calls Me'ah She'arim, Me'ah Sharim. That's the original Mei Yesharim. Where does it come from? Because Yitzchak's yield was 100 times the normal yield. Me'ah she'arim. And he's able to dig wells, and he's able to have success in the land. And the Philistines look at this and they say, how come we're such low Yitzlachs? We can't succeed in the way that Yitzchak, and they become very jealous. Who's this new upstart? He's greener than us. And they start to try and confound everything that he does. Now you have two boys, Yaakov and Esav. They are watching all of these events. What is Yitzchak's response to all of this abuse that he is receiving at the hands of the Philistines? What is his response? You filled up my well? No problem. Yes, sir, yes, sir. Gives him a smile. Goes over and digs another well. Doesn't fight. He knows he's outnumbered. He's a pacifist, Yitzchak, and says, okay, if you feel that this is your property, I'll go somewhere else and dig another well. They fill up that well as well. Yitzchak says, with a smile, no problem, goes to dig another well. Two sons grow up in the same household. They both observe their father's behavior. One is Yaakov and one is Esav. Yaakov takes a positive lesson from his father Yitzchak and has only admiration for his father's approach to peaceful resolution of conflict. Many times, you have to look at what the end result is going to be of your actions. As a matter of fact, the Sefer Haksava HaKabbalah says that that's the reason why his name is Yaakov, because Yaakov is the end of the body. It's the heel of the body. And it also focuses on the most pronounced protruding part of the foot where you put all your weight on. Yaakov is interested in the end game. Yaakov is interested in figuring out how do we get, it's like a chess game, life, many times. How do we get to the checkmate? Not how do we get to the small victory tomorrow, but how do we get to checkmate at the end of the game? And therefore, Yaakov sees his father Yitzchak. He sees, my father is very wise. He's not looking for an immediate victory. He's looking for a long-term victory. Fighting with the Palestinians, with the Philistines, is not going to work. We have to be able to work out some kind of smile, move on to the next well, and eventually, Hashem, who is with us at all times, will figure out a solution. And that's actually what happened. At the very end, Avimelech says, listen, I can't compete with you anymore, Yitzchak. So if you can't beat him, join him. Let's make a peace treaty, and we'll live in peace. And that's the way they end the story. Yitzchak and the Philistines. Okay? So, that's the lesson that Yaakov learns. What's the lesson that Esav learns? Esav, his name comes from the word asui, which is self-made. Self-made, asui, complete, self-sufficient. And he's not going to take that kind of abuse lying down. He's like the Fidel Castro of the biblical story. Okay? And he says, look at the way they abused my father. They disrespected him. And they treated him with such contempt and condescension. I'm never going to allow that to happen to me. And that's how sometimes two people, even two people who grew up in the exact same home, can take opposite lessons from the same kind of parenting. One child learns one lesson from the parent, and the other child learns the opposite lesson from the parent. A lot of it depends on the perspective, the personality, and the attitude towards the parent. Yaakov viewed his father with great admiration and respect, and saw that his father had a long-term plan. Esav looked at his father also with somewhat of a condescension. My father's an immigrant also. And perhaps that's what caused him to say, look how the Americans are treating my father, because he's illiterate and doesn't speak the language like Fidel Castro. I'm never going to let that happen to me. And that's interesting. If you look at the very aftermath of that story, what does Esav do right after the story of growing up with the Philistines in Gerar? If you take a look in your text in source number 1, which I didn't, actually source number 4, Pasuk Lamed Dalet, right, immediately after the story of Yitzchak's peaceful resolution with the Philistines, Vayihi Esav ben Arba'im Shana, Vayikach Isha et Yehudit, Bat Be'eri Hachiti, Ve'et Bosemat Bat Elon Hachiti. What does Esav do? He marries whom? He marries 2 Hittite women. Why is the Torah telling me this? Of what significance is it that he marries 2 Hittite women? Before you answer that, take a look at the very next pasuk. Vatihiyena morat ruach liyitzchak u'lerivka. They were caused a lot of embitterment to Yitzchak and Rivka. So the simple understanding is, Esav marries 2 shiksas and they get very upset. That's in the vernacular, the way that we understand the story. But it's not that trite. Why did they cause grief to Yitzchak and Rivka?
Because he's abandoning his heritage.
He's abandoning his heritage, but why did he abandon his heritage?
You said the Hittites were
the indigenous people.
He said, I'm going to marry some wasps.
I'm going to marry the wasps in the Middle East. I'm going to go uptown. I'm going to find myself 2 nice blonde Gentile women. I'll be able to mix in the upper class, and I'll never let what happened to my father happen to me. I'll change my name from Weinstein to Winston. I'll go to church every Sunday, and when they ask me to say a sacrament, I'll say, my fellow Goyim, you know that old joke, right? The Jew who converts to Christianity and gets up to give the sacrament one day, and he says, my fellow Goyim, Anyway, that's an old joke. But anyway, so the point is that this was Esav's attitude. This was his attitude. And why were they in source of embitterment? You'll see if you look at we're out of town at the time, but if you look at the Abarbanel, he says, because they too disrespected Yitzchak and Rivka. These 2 Chachkalas looked at their in-laws as these greeners, these immigrant Jews who came from a foreign land, who didn't know the language, who weren't part of the indigenous culture. And this was the source of embitterment for Yitzchak and Rivka. And that's the story of the Jewish people. You got your Yaakovs, and you've got your Esavs, and we get to decide who we want to be. Have a great day, everybody.